Hey everyone. So, if you were fortunate, or I guess you could look at it as unfortunate, if you're someone that actually cares about having your voices heard, well, if you want to push back against the establishment or the status quo, what you've seen and heard from those who represent the Canadian government, and like I said, you had liberals and dippers and conservatives all joining together, all combining their forces to show solidarity with each other in their attempt to silence or shut down alternative voices, alternative platforms, or anyone that's challenging their dominance in power and influence. Your political masters and thought leaders are desperate to maintain their grip on power and control, and they'll go to great lengths to maintain it. That's where people like myself enter into the equation, or even people such as Terence Corcoran from the Financial Post. We're here to push back against that suppression and that denial of alternative influence and opinions. A real easy and simple rule of thumb to know if you're dealing with authoritarians is their willingness to once again try to silence or suppress or deny people their voices or their opinions and the platforms that they use to espouse those opinions. And make no mistake about it, many of those in the established media are pretty much on board with supporting what those who represent the establishment political parties in this country are trying to do in terms of trying to silence or suppress our voices. And don't forget, they got $600 million promised to them by the federal liberals that they'll use to push back against those of us who don't have that kind of institutionalized power or the ability to force the Canadian taxpayers to subsidize us. Like I say, folks, not only do they have the bad ideas, but they're showing time and time again that they're not willing to correct their ideas and would rather instead deny anyone else from putting forth their own ideas. Headline of the Financial Post, Terence Corcoran. Politicians try bullying big tech into doing their censorship dirty work. No wonder Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg declined their invitations to show up. It's being reported by Terence Corcoran, May 29th, 2019. Rapid technological change and the rise of the internet have created scores of serious and unresolved legal and political issues. There are matters of privacy, freedom of expression, terrorists, national and international governance, corporate and government conflicts, and copyright issues, to name a few. Into this complex world comes something called the International Grand Committee on Big Data, Privacy, and Democracy. A band of pompous Canadian and international politicians who, in Ottawa Tuesday, delivered absurd demagogic harangues as they bullied and insulted junior executives of the main players in the tech revolution, namely Facebook, Google, and Twitter. The Grand Committee on Big Data, right? The Grand Committee. That's so collectivist. Like that's basically like if you could translate it from Russian or Chinese. It's basically, I'm sure they have in those authoritarian regimes, well, especially in Russia under the communist regimes in the past. This is the kind of stuff that you would have seen put forth by those who were part of their ruling establishment or propagandists. Like I've said so many times in the past, folks, Western leaders and the authoritarians among them who represent the bulk of those who are in positions of so-called authority these days are very much all about authoritarian collectivism. Make no mistake about it. It might have seemed like post the Cold War that we defeated collectivism, but in reality, many authoritarians and central planners just figured out a way to interject and make that part of the Canadian governmental structures and the media landscape. The Grand in the committee's overblown title apparently stands for grandstanding. Through most of the hearings, the politicians who are members of the committee, called from more than a dozen countries from Singapore to the United Kingdom to Mexico, ritually engaged in self-aggrandizing and condescending put-downs of the unfortunates who appeared before them. The most obnoxious performers were the Canadians. No wonder Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg declined their invitations to show up. The only reason they were invited was to subject them to verbal abuse and cheap political interrogations aimed at their humiliation. The lower-level executives who did show up, particularly Facebook's directors of public policy, Neil Potts and Kevin Chan, acquitted themselves admirably through the constant sneers, put-downs, and interruptions. At the end of the afternoon session, the chair of the hearing, Conservative MP Bob Zimmer from BC called out shame over Zuckerberg's failure to appear. One politician, it was unclear who, called it abhorrent. Zimmer, apparently doing a Trump imitation, said that as soon as they step foot, either Mr. Zuckerberg or Miss Sandberg, into our country, they will be served with a summons and expected to appear before our committee. All seem to agree that the Facebook CEO was in contempt of Parliament, essentially for declining to submit to the staged contempt of the world's parliamentarians. So anyways, folks, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below. But and I've seen that even in the video I put out already, somewhat referencing this stuff in the past. I think it was just, a day or two ago. But if you think about it, listen, I get that some of you, and I'm reiterating here, I even said it in that video, I get that you're not real happy with some of the things or actions that have been reported and taken by some of these social media execs as far as targeting particular people from a political persuasion. I get it. I'm totally on board with you there. Like, come on. But what I don't understand is if you, for 1 minute, think that government, especially the Canadian government, should have any capacity to regulate, control, or micromanage these social media platforms, then what do you think that's going to turn into? You're just going to end up with your CBC types, people that become part of the establishment. That's the thing. Once government regulates you, it's not like, that's the thing. You think you're going to cause harm to Facebook, but no, you'll just get the wrong people controlling these social media platforms, where now people like myself, I won't have any opportunity. That's the thing. Oh, you want the government to regulate the internet or social media platforms? Well, then if you're one of those proponents, then you're looking for them to be able to shut down or deny my voice. And if that's what you're doing, then I just don't, to me, it's like you can't be a friend or a fellow traveler as far as standing for or promoting individual rights, freedoms, or liberty or personal responsibility. To me, you're just playing that authoritarianism, especially if you're a conservative at this particular time. I know a lot of you are peed off that some of your big vocal proponents and people that you align with have had their voices denied or shut down by some of these social media platforms. But once again, if you pivot towards government as the ultimate means to your end, because government is that representation of monopoly of force or violence, Facebook, Zuckerberg or Sandberg don't have that pretense of authority or that, that mystical gun in the room that they're going to use against you. They might try to deny you your ability to use their platform, but you have the ability to push back against them by using alternative platforms. That's the beautiful aspect of the free market, is if they're harming you or if they harm enough people, well, people will pivot towards to Minds or Gab or some of these alternative social media platforms. Stop running to government to fix or correct problems that are happening out there, like I say, in the marketplace, whether it's in the marketplace of idea or in the consumer marketplace, as far as products or services provided to us. Allow the free market, allow free people to do the right thing. Stop pivoting to authoritarians and collectivists to be the final arbiters or deciders and dictators of what you can see or hear as far as online activity. That is going to be, like I say, if people fall for this nonsense that the established media and the established parties are putting out there as far as the propaganda and their hate and derision towards social media platforms, if you fall for that, well, they will have won. And you might think for that short little time frame, especially like I say, if you're conservative, oh yeah, I want to regulate social media because then they'll have to allow my voice out there. Really? You really think that's going to happen? Wow. Really? Talk about utopian. No, like I say, utopian is believing that placing the authority of government, once again, the monopoly of force or violence, and the power of politics, the power of having professional liars, right, in charge of the internet or social media. Yeah, if you think that's a good idea, once again, first of all, it tells me you haven't actually sat down and thought about this at all critically. And if that's the case, then yeah, zip it, or at least keep your thoughts contained within your head until you've figured out how to propagate them in the verbal realm in a manner that's more conducive with respecting my rights, freedoms, and liberties. Because no, I don't want you, like I say, whether you come from the left or right, I don't want any out there to have any capacity or ability to give government the power to dictate what I'm allowed to see or hear. I'm adult, you're adult, we're all adults. Let's treat each other such. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.